The last radio call. Morning light slides down the canyon walls like liquid bronze, touching the faces of hikers who've just stepped onto the Angel's Landing Trail. In the distance, a small quadrotor hums, its camera tilting toward a ledge most visitors never notice. The pilot, an off-duty park biologist named Ryan Ellis, leans closer to his tablet. Something glints for half a second between the shadow and the sun. He freezes the frame. It's round, tarnished, and unmistakably man-made. A ranger's badge. Fade back 33 years. July 8, 1992. Zion National Park. The park was quieter then. No timed entries, no shuttle queues stretching down the road. Just wind through the cottonwoods and the sound of boots on sand. Ranger David Langford, 36 years old, had been with the National Park Service for nearly a decade. Locals said he knew the canyons like a person learns the lines on their own hands. He lived alone in a one-room ranger cabin near the Kolob Terrace Road, drove an aging forest green Bronco, and carried a notebook filled with neat block handwriting. Weather, trail conditions, hiker counts, and the date of every rescue he'd ever joined. That Wednesday began with a storm alert on the radio. Monsoon cells forming over Washington County. Lightning risk, moderate. Flash flood risk, high. Langford checked the radar printout pinned by his desk, sipped burnt coffee, and keyed the mic. Zion Base, this is Ranger Langford, at Lava Point. Visibility good. I'll head down to West Rim Sector 4 for signage check before the storm moves in. Copy that, 4. Keep it short today. We're getting reports of isolated downpours near the Narrows. Affirmative. Should be back by 1600. It was 10:42 a.m. He loaded his pack, 2 liters of water, first aid kit, poncho, notebook, a lunch tin his sister had mailed from Flagstaff, and the polished brass badge he always clipped to the left of his uniform. He carried an old Nikon film camera, too, mostly for documenting trail damage. At the trailhead, a pair of hikers saw him pause, glance up at gathering clouds, and adjust the brim of his hat. He told us to keep an eye on the runoff channels, one of them recalled later. Said the storms here don't give warnings. They just happen. Afternoon. By 2 p.m., thunder had rolled in from the west. Sheets of rain stitched the skyline. Dispatch logged a brief weather call from Langford at 14:16, his last recorded transmission. Base, got movement east of Cabin Spring. Looks like runoff starting early. I'll secure signage and head back up. Static swallowed the rest. Operators noted the interference and moved on. Storm chatter always filled the bands. When evening came and no return check-in arrived, duty supervisor Mark Holloway tried raising him again. Nothing. They waited another hour. At 18:30, Holloway called Search and Rescue Protocol Alpha. The search begins. The first team mustered at the West Rim Ranger Station under a bruised purple sky. Wind slacked the radio antennas against their masts. Among the volunteers were seasonal workers, a local climber named Jenny Hurst, and a young ranger trainee, Luis Moreno, barely 23. Langford's route should have kept him between Cabin Spring and Potato Hollow, Holloway briefed, tracing the map with a pencil. We'll fan in 3 directions: ridgeline, drainage, and lower wash. Expect washouts. He had rain gear and experience. If he's sheltered, he's fine. Lightning flickered along the canyon rim as they started. Moreno remembered calling into the radio every 15 minutes. Ranger Langford, this is Team 2 on Lower Wash. Do you copy? Only static answered. They searched until 02, headlights cutting through mist, rain turning the red dust into slick clay. The Bronco was found near the trailhead, doors locked, keys gone. Inside sat his field notebook open to a half-written line. Trail signage, missing stake near Switchback 5. Day 2, July 9th. The rain eased. By dawn, a dozen SAR volunteers from neighboring counties joined. Helicopters from Grand Canyon Base arrived with infrared scopes. They flew grids across the West Rim Plateau. Nothing. At noon, they located Langford's poncho snagged in a juniper branch roughly half a mile from Cabin Spring. Below it, footprints led toward a narrow side canyon locals called the Notch. The prints abruptly stopped at a fresh washout, a 10-foot drop scoured by flash flood. Searchers rappelled down. No body, no pack. Just a broken branch and a scuff on the sandstone, as if someone had slid. Meteorologist reports confirmed a cloudburst in that exact drainage between 1400 and 1500, the same hour as his final call. Could have been swept, said pilot Ken Sutter when he landed to refuel. Those canyons funnel water like concrete chutes. They expanded the perimeter. Rangers collected debris, a torn map corner, a snapped radio antenna, and one unlabeled roll of 35mm film found near a boulder. The film, soaked and streaked, was sent to lab in Springdale. Most frames were blank, but one, the last, showed a tilted horizon, blurred rain, and what might have been the shadow of a man standing under a ledge. Day 4, community joins in. Local climbers and hikers volunteered. Over 100 people combed the area for 5 straight days. News crews from Salt Lake City arrived, filming interviews in the rain. Langford's sister, Carol Whitman, flew in and stood near the command tent, clutching his ranger hat. He always said the park was alive, she told reporters. If something happened, he'd want us to respect it. But I can't leave without him. By the week's end, they had covered 30 square miles. Dogs lost scent after the wash zone. Helicopters turned up only more debris, twigs, rocks, a collapsed section of ledge. On July 14, 1992, the search officially scaled back to limited patrol. The case file was labeled missing person, presumed accident, flash flood. The years that followed, the storm scars faded, tourists returned. Rangers passed along Langford's story to new recruits like a cautionary legend. Respect the monsoon. His cabin was cleared out, belongings boxed and sent to family. Yet some things stayed. A rust stain on his desk from that coffee mug, a small scratch on the radio mic where he tapped it during static. In 1995, a hiker found his field compass near Cabin Spring, still functional despite rust. The park logged it as artifact number 92-41-B, placed in storage. In 2004, an amateur historian, Daniel Reed, reopened the file for a wilderness safety exhibit. He interviewed veterans who had known Langford. David had this idea, one said. He wanted a new safety post installed up by the Notch, somewhere nobody liked going because it felt wrong after storms. He said people underestimate what silence can do before water comes. That quote ended up engraved on the exhibit plaque at the visitor center. Silence is the warning you don't hear twice. Ranger D. Langford, 1992. Memory of a name. For decades, visitors would see that plaque without knowing the story in full. Every few years, hikers claimed to glimpse something metallic far below a ledge near Angel's Landing. Park staff dismissed it. Sunlight on wet rock, maybe a beer can. The area was off limits, sheer vertical. Then came the drones. By 2020, hobbyists began filming aerial passes for social media. Rangers occasionally confiscated footage as it violated park rules. But some images made it online. Brief glints in the canyon, odd geometric reflections. Comments underneath speculated. Old ranger gear, equipment, maybe even fossils of the 1990s flood. The park didn't encourage speculation. Langford's family had moved to Oregon. Only his sister Carol still visited every July, placing a small pine cone at the trailhead. He used to say pines survive lightning better than people, she told one reporter in 2019. That's why I bring one back each year. 2025, The Return of the Wind. Ryan Ellis, the biologist flying that drone in the opening scene, was surveying vegetation recovery after a dry winter. His unit operated under park permit, technically legal. When he paused over a cliff ledge and saw the gleam, he almost ignored it. But instinct, something half scientific, half human, made him yaw the drone for another angle. The object caught sunlight again, round, reflective, patterned. He zoomed in, an embossed outline of a tree, faint letters around the rim. U.S. National Park Service. He set the drone to hover and marked coordinates. The ledge was 30 meters down from the established trail, accessible only by rappel. He radioed headquarters. "Base, this is Ellis. I might have found something. Coordinates coming your way. Looks like it could be a badge." The response was immediate. Within hours, Ranger Supervisor Lena Moreno, the same Luis Moreno who'd once searched for Langford as a trainee, was on scene, now in her 50s. She still carried the memory of that night in '92 like grit in the pocket of her uniform. She looked at the frozen drone footage and whispered, "It's him." The canyon reopens. The news traveled faster than the wind that carved the cliffs. By mid-morning, the coordinates from Ryan Ellis's drone had reached Zion headquarters, period. Flagged historical evidence, priority. A recovery crew was mobilized. 3 technical climbers, 1 park archaeologist, a law enforcement ranger, and 2 witnesses for chain of custody. They called it a site inspection. Everyone knew what it really was. July 18th, the ascent back to the notch. The approach to Angel's Landing looked different now. Guardrails, warning plaques, a steady hum of visitors, unaware of the story unfolding a few hundred yards away. A temporary closure order was posted that morning. The sign read, "Trail section closed for environmental assessment." Behind it, silence swallowed the canyon. Lena Moreno tightened her harness. Her hands shook slightly. She told the others it was just caffeine. But the truth was, she could still hear the radio static from 1992, the unanswered calls bouncing off these same walls. 33 years, said Ellis quietly, checking his drone monitor. And it was sitting there the whole time. Moreno nodded. Zion keeps its own archives. They rappelled one by one down the face, ropes squeaking against sandstone polished smooth by decades of wind. The ledge was narrow, no more than 3 feet wide, curved like a balcony, halfway between heaven and earth. Sunlight hit it for only an hour each day. That morning it arrived right on cue. The badge lay half embedded in silt, caught between 2 stones. A faint circle of oxidized brass, surrounded by delicate lichen. No fabric, no bones, just that single artifact. The photographer snapped evidence frames from every angle before Moreno bent to look. She recognized the design instantly, the 1970s issue National Park Service shield with the sequoia and bison engraving. Across the top, despite corrosion, the letters still read Langford. Chain of custody, number 2025 Z14. The evidence bag was sealed at 10:37 a.m., witnessed by all personnel. Moreno logged the find, her signature trailing slightly where her hand trembled. Back at base, technicians photographed the badge under UV. The back clasp had snapped cleanly, suggesting impact. A thin line of hardened mineral residue indicated it had once been submerged, possibly deposited by floodwater that later evaporated. Could have been carried down from above, said the geologist, but given where it rested, maybe he fell or leaned out before the storm hit. The team flagged the coordinate for limited excavation. For the first time since 1992, Case 92 Langford was reopened, the cabin revisited. That afternoon, Moreno drove up Colub Terrace Road toward Langford's old ranger cabin. It still stood, refurbished now as a storage shed, the porch sagging but intact. Inside, she found the same desk, same radio mount, though the mic had long been removed. Dust lay thick on the window frame. She touched the carved initials DL on the edge of the desk, faint beneath layers of varnish. She remembered the morning after he vanished, standing here, hearing the silence where his voice should have been. Now she placed the recovered badge on that same wood and let the weight of years settle. "We thought we lost you to water," she whispered. Turns out you stayed. Lab analysis. At the Regional Evidence Lab in St. George, technicians conducted corrosion and soil tests. Results confirmed the badge's mineral coating matched sediments from the flood layer of July 1992. An exact geologic fingerprint. A trace of faded cloth fiber adhered to the clasp. Cotton poly blend consistent with NPS uniform fabric from that era. More surprising was a microscopic salt crust embedded inside the rim, indicating prolonged submersion followed by drying. Proof it had traveled in floodwater before resting on the ledge. Hydraulics carried it upward in a back eddy, concluded the report. Debris surge likely forced object onto cliff pocket, where it remained undisturbed. Translation: the canyon itself had returned what it once took. The file reopens to public interest by late July, word leaked. A local newspaper ran a short column, Possible Evidence Found in 1992 Zion Ranger Disappearance. Within hours, national outlets called for confirmation. The park released a cautious statement: no sensationalism, just facts. Still, visitors began leaving small tokens at the trailhead again. Pine cones, miniature ranger hats, notes thanking those who never stopped searching. The view count on the old memorial page spiked. Carol Whitman, David's sister, now 71, saw the article while watering her Oregon garden. She called the park office, voice trembling. "Does this mean you found him?" Moreno answered personally. "We found something that was his, and that's a start." Revisiting the search zone. In August, a multidisciplinary team returned to the notch for full survey. Ground-penetrating radar mapped sediment layers. Drones created 3D models. Every fragment of metal or fabric was tagged. They uncovered pieces of a broken radio housing stamped Motorola 1991, half a buckle, and a fragment of plastic lens from a camera viewfinder. Each item lined up with Langford's inventory list from '92. When Moreno read that, she sat down on the rock and stared at the horizon until her radio crackled again with modern static. She smiled through tears. "Always the thorough one, Dave." Film recovered. Among the stored evidence from 1992 was that ruined roll of 35mm film. It had been kept frozen in archive but never digitally enhanced. Technology then wasn't ready. A park archivist, curious after the badge find, sent it to a restoration specialist. Weeks later, a call came. "You need to see this." Frame number 17, previously thought blank, revealed faint shapes once contrast enhanced. A dark overhang, streaks of rain, and a figure with an arm raised, perhaps shielding eyes from water or holding a radio. In the corner, a flash reflection exactly matches the ledge's rock curvature. "That's the same formation," said Ellis, comparing drone stills. He was right there before the surge. Frame number 18 was pure blur, likely the moment the flood hit. The photo became the new closing image for internal reports, a reminder not of death, but of duty caught in a storm. A canyon's memory. Through autumn 2025, rains came and went, softer this time. The ledge remained stable. Rangers set up a small observation camera, not for security, but to monitor erosion. Sometimes when the sun set just right, the lens caught light, bouncing off the cliff wall, where the badge had rested, a pulse of gold, fading into shadow. Moreno began recording voice notes after each patrol like Langford once did. Sector 4 clear, sunset at 19:20, wind 5 knots from west, no warnings today. Those logs were unofficial, but necessary, a way to keep conversation alive. The community responds. When the park quietly allowed journalists to film a short segment for a documentary, messages poured in. Retired rangers wrote letters recalling rescues Langford had led in the '80s. One mentioned that he used to carve small notches on his walking stick for every successful save, 32 in total. The stick had never been recovered. Local schools organized essay contests about what the canyon remembers. Children painted badges in art class, hanging them near the visitor center plaque. Zion's social media post about ranger safety used the hashtag for Ranger Langford. Algorithmic reach aside, it struck a human chord. Comments read like whispered prayers. He kept others safe. The canyon kept him. Not lost, just guarding the trail from another place. Parallel investigation. Meanwhile, forensic hydrologists mapped historical rainfall data. Computer simulations showed that during the 1992 monsoon, a rare phenomenon called a hydraulic jump occurred at the exact wash where Langford's footprints ended. An upward surge capable of launching heavy debris, even a person, several meters up canyon walls. If Langford had sought shelter beneath the overhang captured on his camera, he might have been overtaken by that wave and carried toward the ledge zone. His body, lightweight compared to the flood volume, could have been drawn into temporary pools downstream, later dispersed. Nature erased, but never entirely forgot. The badge's preservation, scientists said, was almost miraculous. A brass token surviving decades of cycles, waiting for a dry year when vegetation receded just enough for a drone's lens to notice. A personal visit. In late September, Carol Whitman arrived under clear skies. She met Moreno at the trailhead. They hiked slowly to the overlook, where the canyon opened like a cathedral. Moreno handed her the polished badge, now sealed behind museum glass. "We're still calling it evidence," she said softly, "but to me, it's a message." Carol traced the engraved letters with a fingertip through the glass. He always believed the park listened. Maybe it finally answered. They stood in silence until the wind rose. Pine needles swirled around them, settling near their boots like tiny compass needles pointing home, closing the loop. That evening, the park board approved installation of a new memorial at Cabin Spring. A bronze plaque mounted on sandstone, reading, "In honor of Ranger David Langford, who gave his days to watch the skies and warn the rest of us." Missing since 1992, found by the place he protected in 2025. Beneath it, a line from his recovered notebook. "Every search teaches you that the world keeps the things it values most." The canyon at night. When the crowd left, Moreno stayed behind. Crickets pulsed in the dark. The cliffs radiated stored heat. She looked toward the faint light of the ledge, invisible now, but alive in memory. Her radio crackled with automatic weather updates. Monsoon probability, 0%. She smiled. "Good night, Dave." The canyon slept under a pale October moon when the park decided to close the file. But stories like this never really close. They echo. A winter drought had left the Virgin River low and clear. Rangers used the break to revisit the lower wash, hoping to map how far the 1992 surge had traveled. They worked in silence, measuring sediment depth, photographing root exposure, logging mineral strata. One of the technicians, a quiet intern named Ethan, knelt beside a cluster of willows and brushed away sand. Something metallic winked up at him, a circle of rusted tin, smaller than a coin, still attached to frayed nylon. He called for Moreno. She came running, flashlight steady. The tag read, "Property of Zion, Rescue Pack 3, Langford's Pack." Inside were fragments, a compass cracked down the center, a notebook fused by mud, and a pen whose ink cartridge had burst decades ago, but still smelled faintly of salt and earth. No human trace, no miracle discovery. ... Just the relics of a man who'd chosen to walk into the storm. They carried the pack out at dawn. Sunlight turned the cliffs gold again, same as the day he left. From the rim, the valley below looked endless and small all at once. Moreno held the badge and the pack together for a photo. Not for press, not for record, just for herself. She whispered something she'd meant to say years ago. "You did come home." News of the recovery spread quietly. No breaking headlines. Just a paragraph buried in the park's seasonal report. Additional artifacts linked to the 1992 Langford incident were located during routine fieldwork. The search is considered resolved. But among rangers, word traveled faster. They talked about how the canyon had kept his things like heirlooms, releasing them one by one when the timing felt right. That winter, the Park Service restored his cabin completely. They stripped the paint, left the old nail holes untouched, polished the window glass until it mirrored the pines. On the desk, they placed his badge in a wooden frame, the notebook beside it, pages still stiff with sediment. Visitors could step inside, hear a faint recording looped through a small speaker. His last known radio log, cleaned of static. Zion Base, this is Langford. Sky darkening, trail signage, secure. Heading up soon. Then silence. Then the low sound of rain beginning. Outside, a trail marker pointed west toward the notch. It wasn't part of any official route, just a small side path lined with stacked stones. Hikers left offerings there, pine cones, miniature flashlights, tiny carved badges. No one advertised it. The canyon did its own marketing. In February, Moreno attended a safety conference in Denver. She presented the Langford case as a lesson in hydrology and patience. Her closing slide showed the badge, shining under drone light. Technology didn't solve this, she said. Time did. We just learned how to listen. Afterward, a younger ranger approached her. Do you really think the park remembers? She smiled. You'll see. Every place with wind and water keeps its own memory. We just forget to translate. By spring, Zion bloomed early. The cottonwoods turned green before Easter. The river shimmered like new glass. Tourists crossed the bridges, unaware they were walking over the same current that had once carried a man away. But every so often, someone would pause at the overlook and read the plaque. They'd stand still longer than most people do, as if waiting to hear an answer. Moreno visited on July 8th, 33 years to the day. She carried a single pine cone and set it at the base of the plaque. A boy nearby asked if she was leaving something for a friend. She nodded. For a ranger who never stopped working. The boy squinted at the badge under glass. Is he still out there? She looked toward the cliffs, where sunlight caught the ledge like a blade of gold. In a way. Later, when the park closed for the evening, she stayed alone on the trail. The air was warm, the wind low. From somewhere above, a raven called once and disappeared into the blue. She took off her hat, letting the air touch her hair, and said softly, "Weather clear, duty done." The canyon answered with silence, the good kind, the kind that sounds like peace. That night, at headquarters, she logged her final report for the case. All items cataloged and secured. Memorial complete. Subject believed deceased in flood of 1992. Case closed. She hesitated, then added one more line. The park remembers. At dawn, rain returned for the first time in months. Not a storm. Just a steady cleansing rain that darkened the cliffs and filled the dry creeks with whispers. Drops tapped the cabin roof where the badge rested. Beneath it, the notebook pages swelled gently, releasing a faint smell of cedar and iron. A visitor walking by that morning swore she heard a radio crackle from inside, one brief burst of static, then quiet. Rangers checked. Nothing powered, no signal logged. They smiled, said the canyon plays tricks when weather changes. But some of them believed otherwise. ... Down in the valley, the river carried a single pine needle from Cabin Spring, all the way past the bridge, glinting in the current like a small piece of brass before vanishing around the bend. And high above, where the badge had once lain, the ledge shimmered in the sun, not as a mystery anymore, but as proof that even in a place built from silence and stone, memory endures.